protests over the recent deaths of George Floyd in Minneapolis and Ahmaud Arbery in Glynn County in South Georgia, Brunswick, and Breonna Taylor in Louisville, all three cases involving police or people with ties to law enforcement and accusations of police brutality or systemic racism. As we gear up for another night of protests, Governor Kemp has a message for the men and women in law enforcement, saying that he is proud of efforts to keep the protests peaceful after the chaos on Friday night. Ryan Kruger spoke with Governor Kemp about the increased security that he has ordered at the protests. Ryan?
Yeah, Jeff, one thing that Governor Kemp mentioned, he was shocked when he saw those protests take the turn they did, because he said for weeks there have been peaceful protests down in Brunswick where, as you mentioned, Ahmaud Arbery was killed. He figured he'd have the same kind of peaceful protests, but instead he said in Atlanta what has made them different is that there are specific bad actors, he called them, who showed up with their own agenda. In fact, Governor Kemp, along with GBI Director Vic Reynolds, said that they do have intelligence showing that some of the protesters are part of organized groups that are specifically there to cause violence and destruction. However, they wouldn't go into further detail about who these groups were and how they gathered this information. Governor Kemp says he supports peaceful protests, but he says that those, quote, bad actors will be singled out and arrested.
We don't want to arrest anybody, but we have to have people follow the law. And when they don't, it puts us in a bad spot. They are here to disrupt, to injure the men and women that are on the streets, trying to keep the peaceful protesters safe.
Now, the governor has mobilized upwards of 3,000 National Guardsmen in the state of Georgia. We did ask today if he does plan to mobilize any more. He said at this point in time he does not have any plans to. Jennifer?
Ryan, thank you so much.